Hello everyone, today I am again here with a very important video. So in this one we are going to cover September 6th IELTS Real Exam reading passage. So this reading passage was asked in September 6th IELTS Real Examination. The name of the passage was the Battle of Towton. In this passage there were 5 fill in the blanks, 4 true false not given and 4 multiple choice questions. Alright, so in this one we are going to solve the entire passage. So let's get going and let's read first question. Choose one word or a number. So you can either answer your question with one word or a number. So the battlefield of Towton in northern England has only recently been surveyed and excavated. Archaeologists are now looking at medieval dash in a new way. Alright, so the Battle of Towton in northern England has only recently been so the battlefield where the battle was fought in northern England, so it's getting surveyed and excavated. So during excavation and survey, archaeologists are now looking. So they are looking at medieval dash in a new way. That means we have to find something which is medieval and which is being looked upon by the archaeologists. So archaeologists are now looking at medieval dash. So they are looking at something in a new way. Alright. So let's read the passage. March 29, 1461 in tiny Towton was one of the bloodiest days in England history, yet only recently have a small number of soldiers' bodies undergone exhumation and examination. Several thousand still lie buried in mass graves on the battlefield. Every analysis of the remains has led to a reassessment of medieval war frame. That means several thousand still lie buried in mass graves in the battlefield. Okay, so there are still a lot which are still in the graves. Early analysis of the remains has led to a reassessment of medieval war frame. So something is being reassessed, means it was previously assessed once upon a time, but now it is getting reassessed, means it is getting assessed again. So what is getting assessed again? It's medieval warfare. Alright, so there is a reassessment of medieval warfare. Here the question says archaeologists are now looking at medieval dash in a new way. In a new way means they were already looked upon previously in a way, but now these things are being looked upon again in a new way. Again in a new way means, so the synonym for this one is reassessment. So what is getting reassessed? Medieval war frame. Medieval war frame. Okay, so medieval word is already there, so our answer will be warfare. So a straightforward one. Although a major battle took place at Towton, this is not popular knowledge for English people as the battle is not studied at. Okay, so there is a sentence with although. So although sentence is very important in your reading. So it carries two opposite things. For example, although it is raining, comma, I am unable to come for the class. Although it is raining, I will come for the class. So there are two different type of sentences. So although it is raining, I will come for the class. So these are two opposite ones. As it is raining, so I am unable to come for the class. So these are not the opposite ones, but these are. Although it is raining, I will come for the class. So the same sentences here, although. So it will carry two opposite things. It will carry two opposite sentences. So let's mark them. Although a major battle took place at Towton. So the first one is that a major battle took place at Towton, and that is understood that if a major battle took place at Towton, then everyone should be aware of that. But the sentence says opposite because it's although, So they said a major battle took place at Towton, but this battle was not popular. So although a major battle took place at Towton, this is not popular knowledge for English people. Because why it is not popular being a major battle? Because battle is not studied at. So we have to find something where something is studied. So maybe school, educational institution, or something like that. So it was not popular because this battle was not studied at. Okay. So let's find. Let's read the second one. Towton, a village in the north of England between York and Leeds, is unknown to many people. So here it says Towton is unknown to many English people. So this is our location. History taught at school largely ignores. So they did teach history to students, but they ignored, largely they ignored the mid 15th century. Towton itself has, first of all, why it is unpopular? First of all, it was not taught enough. Second, it has no museum, it has no memorial, it just has merely a roadside cross to mark where the battle took place. Alright, so that's why, because of these reasons, the Battle of Towton is not popular. But our question is not related to museum, memorial, or crossroad, but our question is related to teaching. So the location is this line. History taught at school largely ignores. So that means this history was taught, but this particular type of battle was not taught. That's why it is not popular. Alright, so let's fill the blank. Although major battle took place at Towton, this is not popular knowledge for English people as the battle is not studied at school. So here is our answer, at school. So at is already there, so answer is school. Third one, in 1996, soldiers' skeletons were found under a building near Towton. Okay, so this is a complete sentence in itself, but our fill in the blanks is for this one. Dash of these had all their bones. Okay, so these two sentences are connected. In 1996, soldiers' skeletons were found under a building near Towton. So in a building near Towton, there were a lot of skeletons found. Dash of these means maybe some of these or whatever. Dash of these means soldiers' skeletons. So these is referring this thing. In 1996, soldiers' skeletons were found under a building near Towton. Okay, dash of these had all their bones. Okay, dash of these. So we have to find something related to something, or maybe a skeleton which had all the bones present. Okay, let's read the third passage. In 1996, a building nearby called Towton Hall was being renovated when laborers unearthed skeletons in its ground and beneath its floor. Okay, so this was our first line. That means our location is here. 28 of these, again, so these means these skeletons. 28 of these were complete. Okay, so our sentence, our location is there. So they were skeletons were found under a building near Towton. And how many of these had all the bones? All the bones mean were complete. So synonym for complete is all the bones. So how many of these skeletons had all the bones? I mean, how many of these were complete? So they were 28. So we can write one number or a word. So what we will do is we will write 28. So we can't write 28. So it's better to write 28 because we can use a number. Alright. So the next question is, this meant archaeologists could accurately determine how the soldiers had died. Okay. Archaeologists were very surprised by the dash means of death. So here what we have to find that archaeologists were very surprised by dash. So they were surprised by what? First of all, we have to find this. They were surprised by dash means of death. Like what type of death did they get? So we have to find a type of death here. because they were very surprised by the dash means of death and the uncaring method of dash and some kind of method of dash. All right, so let's read the message. What shocked archaeologists? Okay, so here is our location. So the synonym for surprised is shocked. So what shocked archaeologists were the violent way. So we had to find means. So answer could be violent way in which the men had met their death. Okay, so the question is asking this one. So by what kind of way of death archaeologists were shocked? So they were shocked because the death they had was very violent. Archaeologists were very surprised by the violent means of death and the uncaring method of death. Okay, so it will be followed by the next one. And uncaring method of. So answer should be somewhere here. Okay, what shocked archaeologists were the violent way in which the men had met their death and the so answer is here, and after and the callous manner of their burial. Callous means unkind. Unkind means the synonym for unkind here is uncaring. Unkind or callous. So callous method of what? Callous method of their burial. So answer is burial. See, the passage was not very difficult. If you understand it properly, then solve, then you can definitely crack your reading. Alright, so the next one is type is true false not given. So we had to solve 4 true false not given. Okay, let's solve this one. So if the statement agrees with the information, we have to mark true. If the statement contradicts the information, we have to mark false. If there is no information on this, we have to mark not. So the first question is, the Battle of Towton was part of a war between two families seeking control over England. Okay, so when this statement be true, it will be true when it will say that the Battle of the Towton was a part of war. I mean, for example, the war lasts 4 years, so Battle of Towton was a part of that war. Maybe over a period of 4 years there were 18 wars, for example, and Towton was one among them. That means Battle of Towton was part of war. Part of war means this one. So if the Battle of Towton was a part of war between two families seeking control over England, so it will be true. If it is not a part of the war between two families seeking control over England, it will be false. Otherwise, if something is missing, then it will be not given. Alright, so let's read this one. Question number 6. So we have to find the location first of all. Okay, two families. Okay, so the location will be somewhere here. Two families. Okay, so let's skim it. We are familiar with the or it could be a case of women. Okay, so nothing is being talked about families here. Let's read the next passage. So what was the Battle of Towton? It was one clash. Okay, it was one clash of many. So there were many clashes between two powerful families, but the Battle of Towton was one among them. For example, there were 18 clashes, so Towton was one among them. That means it was one clash of many. Okay, so this matches. It was part of the war. Between two families, yes, between two families who each wanted their king to rule. I mean, who wanted their king to rule the England. Okay, so it's clearly true. It says that the Battle of Towton was a part of war between two families seeking control. Yes, it says that Battle of Towton was one clash of many. So there were many clashes and Towton was one among them, and this clash was between two powerful families who wanted their king to rule England. Right, so the entire information is true. Second one, soldiers who fought at Towton were better trained than in the past. Better trained. Okay, so this is a very important word. If there will be a comparison, that is, soldiers who fought at Towton were better trained than in the past. I mean, there were few soldiers, who used to fight before the Battle of Towton. So if they were less trained than these ones, then it is going to be true. Alright? If they are, if others are better trained, they are not better trained, then false. If there is nothing mentioned about the comparison between the training of those who fought at Towton and those who fought in the past, then it is going to be not given. So be very careful. It's a very important question. I'm going to mark it. Alright, so let's skim it. The Lancashire believed that the current king of England, Henry IV, was incapable. So we have to find something related to training then. Okay, so there is nothing related to training. Let's read the next one. If we find something related to training. Yes. Prior to Towton means it talks about something which happened before Towton. So prior to Towton, military encounters in England had been small scale. Okay. So there were some fights before this period, but they were small scale. Battles were fought with hundreds or at most a few thousand men. Next, these battles were small scale, and these battles were fought with handful of men, hundreds or thousands. And the third thing they mentioned about the previous scenario is that no army was professional. So the question compares Towton and the past of Towton. So here is the location because it says prior to Towton. So prior to Towton, there were fights, but there are three characteristics of the fight given. Firstly, they were encounters, or the fights were small scale, and they were fought with handful of people, hundreds or thousands. That's it, no more than that. And the third one is that army was professional, and no army was professional, so they were not professional. Okay, so the answer is till here. But the question says that, what does this question say? Soldiers excuse me, who fought at Towton were better trained. So there is nothing being talked about trained. So they said that yes, they were not professional. I mean, they might not be trained, they were not professional, but they're not talking anything about better. So they're not comparing those soldiers who fought at Towton and the ones who fought previously. So there is no comparison given between them. So there is no sentence which says that who are better at fighting. So they are not giving anything related to better. So the answer is not given. %% of soldiers in England died at Towton. 10% of all soldiers, all. Okay. So, for example, there were 100 soldiers who fought at Towton, and only 10% of 100 died. Alright. So, if yes, 10% died, then it's going to be true. So, the location is, let's skim it. In so-called peacetime, private armies consisted of men ranging from 15 to 50, whose levels of fitness were variable and whose training and equipment was poor. This meant that when fighting did erupt, it seldom lasted long, perhaps just a few days, nor were many men killed. Okay. In fact, there is evidence that more men died from their wounds or illness. Towton is seen was different for here a battle. Okay. So there is nothing. Okay, so maybe the figure is here, so we can just skip that. Let's read from here. Is the location. One estimate of dead is 28,000. Okay, so estimate is that out of 75,000, 28,000 died. But they are not saying that 10% of 75,000 died. If they said that there are this number of people who died, and these were 10% of 75,000, then it would have been true. But they're just saying that 28,000 died, so we are not sure that if it's 10% or not. And one estimate of dead is 28,000 out of 75,000 who took part. These 75% represent 10% of all fighting age men in England. So this 10%, the information about 10% is given just to confuse you, because this 10% information is not related to our question. This is related to something else. The question says that 10% of all soldiers in England died, but the sentence related to death is just this one. So this is a new sentence. So this 10% doesn't talk about the soldiers who died, but this 10% talks about those soldiers were 75,000, and those 75,000 represent 10% of all fighting men. Maybe there were this many fighting men, and 10% of this one represented this one. So 10% of all soldiers in England died at Towton? No. So the answer is false. So be very careful. Alright. So the last question is, guns killed many soldiers at Towton. Okay, so this will say true. Guns killed many soldiers. So if many soldiers were killed with guns, then it's true. If barely any soldiers were killed with guns, then it's false. If no information is given about soldiers getting killed with guns, then it's not given. Alright. So let's read. As injuries show on the skeletons of soldiers already studied, those men were hacked to death, shot by arrow. So nothing talked about gun. They were shot by arrow, trampled by horses. Some of the first bullets used in England were first fired that day. Okay, so few were fired that day, but it talks about killing. Okay. Lead composite shot has been dug up on the battlefield, and one archaeologist claims to have found part of handgun, but there are no obvious death from guns, and it is hard to say how they were used. The most effective weapon was poleaxe. Okay, so what does that say? That he's just saying that first few bullets were shot. That doesn't mean that a lot were killed with guns. And then they are saying that there are no obvious deaths from guns. I mean, there may be very less deaths from guns. Means they are not many. But here it says that guns killed many soldiers at Towton. So the answer is false. Okay, so it says they were many were killed, but here saying there are no obvious deaths from guns. So there are very less number of deaths with gun. But here they say many. Many means a lot. So the opposite for many is there are no obvious deaths from guns. So it's false. I hope you are able to understand. So let's move towards the next one. So all the answers are in a sequence. So I assume it will be not very difficult passage though. Alright. So next we have to solve 4 multiple choice questions. So choose the correct letter ABCD. Write the correct letter. Okay. Most Lanchesters were killed. So we have to search for most Lancastrians. They were killed how? So they were killed in the prison. They were killed by the fighting in lines. They were killed at Towton Hall, or they were killed fleeing the Yorkists. Okay, so we have to find this one. So let's read. The most effective weapon was the poleaxe, a long heavy iron weapon with a sharp tip, a small axe blade on one side, and on the other side large shape head like Philip head screwdriver. Okay, so this is just the description of this weapon. It was used to kill soldiers who were running away as battle lines broke up. Okay. Okay, so this what we say, this weapon was used to kill soldiers. Soldiers were killed with this weapon, and those soldiers were killed with this weapon who were running away as battle lines broke up. So maybe the answer is fleeing the Yorkists. So they were afraid, they were feeling like they might not win the battle. That's why they were fleeing, that's why they were killed. Let's understand it further. So it was used to kill soldiers who were running away as battle lines broke up. Battle lines broke up means they were not able to win the battle, or they lost their discipline, lost the position during the fight. And it is thought this is how most of the Lancastrians buried at Towton all died. Okay, so this talks about most. Our question is about most. Our question is about Lancastrians, and our question is about how did they die. How most of the Lancastrians died. So most of the Lancastrians died because of this one, because they were running away as the battle lines broke up. So they were running. So it's very clearly written that they were killed because they were fleeing the Yorkists. Yorkists means there was a fight between these two. That's why. At Towton, it is likely soldiers' bodies were cut up and buried in mass graves. Okay, Towton, they were firstly killed and their bodies were cut up and then they were buried in mass graves. Why? They are asking the reason. As this was a common practice, so if this was a common practice, then answer is A. Otherwise, what is the next one? B option is because King Edward IV was against religion. So if they are talking something about religion, then the answer is this. Since Yorkists hated Lancastrians, if there is something related to hate, then this answer. Opponents of King Edward IV would live in fear. Okay, so question number 11. Let's find the location and find the answer. It is not known why death rate in the battle was so high, nor why the bodies of soldiers were so disfigured. Okay, so here we are talking about burying them. Skeletal evidence indicates that often a dozen blows were given to a man who would have been killed in the initial 2 or 3. Archaeologists are uncertain when these additional just give me when these additional blows were made on the battle or in the burial process, but such savagery, so answer is here, but such savagery suggests that the emergence of a new concept of an opponent. So there was a new concept introduced by the opponent, but the first one multiple choice says that it was a common practice. So definitely the answer is not first, because this is a new concept introduced by the opponent, as not merely someone to kill. So this concept said that not merely killing someone, but someone whose identity should be utterly effaced. That means to make something disappear. After death in a ritual never before seen in English warfare, soldiers were stripped of their clothes and tossed into mass graves. Okay, to further dehumanize them. Alright, so the location is somewhere here. So why their bodies were cut up and buried? So their bodies were cut up and buried because first of all, it was a common trend. No, religion. So they're not talking anything about religion. They're not talking anything about hate. So opponents of King Edward would live in fear, because the war was between King Edward IV and his opponents. So the bodies were cut and stripped off, so that the opponents, because the location says something about opponents, so that they live in fear. See. So this savagery means this was such a brutal and violent behavior. This was introduced. So this was a newly introduced concept, so that the opponents were not only killed but whose identities were utterly effaced. I mean, the one, if a person hates someone, he would not let him, stay, or he will just erase his identity, because that particular king used to hate them so much that he introduced a new concept that not only killing them but also their identity should be effaced, means they should be disappeared. That's why their bodies were cut up and then buried in mass grave. Their bodies were cut up so that they are not recognized. That's why the opponents of King Edward would live in fear. So we eliminated other ones, and then the answer is D. So that they are not, trying to have another battle with them, so they wanted to just eliminate or make them disappear, so that the other ones would live in fear. And the question is related to King Edward IV. That's why the answer is not this one. So there might be confusion between these two, but I hope I am able to make you understand why the answer is not this one, because the answer corresponds to King Edward IV. Two are already eliminated very properly, so the confusion was between these two. So that's why the answer is related to opponents. The answer is related to not this one. The answer is related to opponents here. That's why the answer is so that opponents of King Edward IV would live in fear. That's why they were buried like this, so that they are not only killed but their identities are also stolen. Next one. Soldiers who died in Swedish battle in 1361 were also killed with poleaxes, went to heaven, were buried in individual graves, were buried more respectfully. Alright. Let's read it. After that, there is the Swedish battle. Swedish battle is somewhere here. Okay. In all Europe, there is only one other known mass grave on the scale of Towton from around the same time, that is Sweden in 1361. There, however, means in this one, they will talk something which is opposite to this one, where they were killed, where they were not only killed, but they were cut into pieces and then they were, buried. So in this one, however, soldiers from the Battle of Visby were buried whole in their armor. So they were not cut. Means were also killed. So they are not talking nothing about poleaxes. Went to heaven. They are not talking about anything like this. Were buried in individual graves. So they are talking that they were buried whole. Their body was not cut and they were buried whole. But they are nothing, giving some sentence related to they were buried in individual graves or mass graves. So even this is not the answer, because this is not mentioned. So they were buried more respectfully because they were not cut and they were buried whole in their armor. That means respectfully they were buried. So the answer is D. A suitable title for the passage would be Towton, a forgotten battle. Forgotten. So this is not forgotten because they were buried, first by cutting them and then putting them in mass graves, so that their identity is, no longer there. So it's not forgotten. So the suitable title for the entire passage: The Horrors of Warfare in an Age Before Guns. Okay, so they talk about something about guns, but not the entire passage is about age before guns. Modern savagery in medieval Towton. Towton, a turning point in military techniques. So they're not talking anything about military techniques. So the answer is this: modern savagery. Savagery means an act which is quite brutal and violent. So yes, in medieval Towton, the way they were buried, they were killed, was brutal and very violent. So that means modern savagery in medieval Towton. So in medieval Towton, there was a brutal act of killing them, cutting them, and burying them in mass graves. So that's why there was a modern savagery in the medieval Towton. So the answer is very straightforward, C. Alright, so I hope you are able to understand all the questions. If you have any doubt, you can just drop a quick comment, and if you want to have more such videos, you can just subscribe to this channel, and then you can also share with your friends so that they can also get out of it a lot out of it. I would say I will be there soon with new exam reading passages, so that you're able to analyze what the type of the reading is, so that you can sit relaxed, prepare it accordingly, and pass your reading test in IELTS. Alright, so this was all for today. Thank you so much, and bye.